Hi everyone. Welcome to YMCA Dublin, the Children's Right Alliance Monitor Launch. My name is Philip. I am part of the Junior Leader Group. This is Kate in the back, Tiffany, Summer, and Simon in the back as well. The Junior Leader Group consists of 5 young people. We act as role models and examples to other young people from YMCA. Over the years, the Junior Leader Group looked at developing our leadership, communication, collaboration, and decision-making skills. For us, being a junior leader at YMCA can have its own pressures. It makes us feel proud, something that we never thought we would be. Other young people would describe us junior leaders as friendly, helpful, supportive, and caring. Our role as a junior leader is to set an example, help the team with planning events, clubs, and helping out with summer projects and residentials. Overall, we are someone you can depend on in the YMCA community. Between us, all of the junior leaders, we've been coming to YMCA for 27 years. The YMCA to us is a welcoming, safe space, inclusive, supportive, motivational, and fun. But it is important to remember that YMCA doesn't just consist of those who attend it, but the staff here too. The staff act as role models who help, guide, educate, and inspire us to be as kind, as caring as they are. Without the staff or the team, there would be no YMCA. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Summer.
Hi everyone, I'm Summer. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the YMCA first. So obviously Philip described our roles as junior leaders, but in YMCA there's so much more than that. We've been coming to YMCA for a long time, as Philip said. We've so many different clubs. We have drop-ins, so that just consists of coming, chilling out, doing whatever you want. We have study clubs, that helps all of us a lot for exams. We have junior leaders, we have global citizens. We have so many different clubs, honestly, and genuinely I'd say to any young person, come to YMCA, you will find something you like, honestly. It's fantastic. I love it. We all love it. We've been coming here for so long. It's brilliant. And now you'll notice that there's a card and a marker on your chair. Can everyone take 5 minutes to reflect on your own experiences and share with us what did your positive role model teach you on the card? You don't need to write your name on them. It can be anonymous. We'll then come around and collect the cards. If you could pass them to the end of your row towards the walls. And if there's not enough markers, we'd encourage to share. At the end of the event, we'll come back and share some of the best cards, read them out. Thank you so much and enjoy the event.
Thank you so much to our junior leaders for the very, very warm welcome to the YMCA in Dublin here today. There's no doubt that we will be seeing you in our places and spaces in the near future. So it's fantastic to see young people leading today's event. They organised a lot of they make decisions about what we're going to be eating today, our lunch and our breakfast and lots of other things. And thank you so much for the lovely pancakes. And I'm delighted to say that the junior leaders will be back to close today's packed agenda. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Meninia Griffith. I am Director of Social Impact Grants and Donor Care with Community Foundation Ireland. I'm also, full transparency, on the board of the Children's Rights Alliance. And previous to this, I was Chief Executive with Belong To, which is a youth organisation down the road here. So I did that for 10 years, so I know the importance of places and spaces for young people to come and just be themselves, find belonging, find their tribe. And it's just wonderful to be here in this space today. So I'm delighted here to chair the launch of the Children's Rights Alliance 2026 Child Poverty Monitor. And before we begin, I do want to give you all the backstory of what brought us here today. As many of you already know, the Child Poverty Monitor is an in-depth analysis of child poverty in Ireland and how growing up in disadvantage and deprivation can impact on all aspects of a child's life. This year marks the 5th edition of the report, which has in that time become a touchstone in the annual calendar where children's advocates, stakeholders, policymakers and political representatives can come together to reflect on progress, interrogate the issues and share solutions. The importance of this work is evident by the number of people joining us here today. Thank you for your presence. But the Child Poverty Monitor also shines a spotlight on solutions that are working to minimise the impact of poverty and deprivation and create positive change and ample opportunities for children and young people. For that reason, we're particularly delighted to be launching this year's report in the YMCA in Dublin, in the heart of the city. So much of the campaign work around this focuses on the impact of child poverty, and the unique quality of this report and our work and the work of the Children's Rights Alliance has been to showcase where communities have stepped up and developed innovative solutions to support children and young people. And today, we're sitting in the best practice example of how that support works. YMCA Dublin is proof that with ambition, joined up thinking and investment, we can break that cycle of poverty and reduce the impact on future generations and this generation. Through its inclusive and trauma-informed childcare services, nearly 200 children receive essential resources and support, including the provision of nutritional support, development monitoring and family support. YMCA Dublin's youth clubs and community-based supports are more than activities. They provide protective spaces, positive engagement, and trusted relationships for young people in the community so that they can thrive. That sense of belonging is evident the minute you pass through this door, the front doors. And we'll hear throughout the discussion today, as you can see all around you, when children and young people can have access to quality early childhood education and care, support on their education journey, access to safe spaces and places to play, to make friends, to be themselves, it can fundamentally change their lives. And I encourage you all to stay after the panel and talk to the amazing staff here in the YMCA and the young people. So a few housekeeping notes before we kick off. We'll have a Q&A session at the end where you'll have an opportunity to raise questions with our panel here today. Today's event is being recorded and will be available to watch back over on the Children's Rights Alliance YouTube page following today's event. So if you don't wish to be a part of that in photography or on the video, please let one of the Children's Rights Alliance staff members know. It's absolutely no problem at all. The team will also be sharing content throughout the day on their social media using the hashtag Child Poverty Monitor. So you can support the work, the aim of today, which is about amplifying and raising awareness for the call for a children's budget designed to deliver targeted measures that can break the cycle of poverty and lift children out of poverty. If you need some inspiration, I encourage you to read the children's budget artwork created by the YMCA junior leaders before you leave here today. They're around the place. But first, we're going to hear from our keynote speaker, Senator Eileen Flynn. So Eileen is a mother of two and an independent senator. As an Irish traveller woman, Eileen passionately challenges inequalities and marginalisation in society. She made history as the first traveller ever appointed to the Seanad and the first traveller woman in the Oireachtas. In 2020, the BBC listed Eileen among the top 100 inspiring and influential women from around the world. We know you're very busy in the Oireachtas today, Eileen, so we're really, really appreciative that you've taken the time to be here for the launch today. Thank you.
Firstly, I'll say it's an absolute privilege to be here this morning and meeting the young people, being able to have conversations with the young people that the Children's Rights Alliance works with. I was privileged to meet one young person who shared their story of living in homeless accommodation. And I hope he takes up the opportunity to come into Leinster House for work experience. And again, I think as public representatives and people who work in organisations, if we can give somebody an opportunity or a hand up, that's what we should do. So my name is Eileen Flynn. I am a member of the Traveller community. I was born and reared in a Houghton site in Ballyfermot. I did my primary school in Ballyfermot, secondary school also in Ballyfermot, and I did an access course in Trinity College. I then went on to work in the Irish Traveller movement as an education officer. Now, at the time, I didn't have a clue of what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, and I always wanted to be a nurse because I cared so much for people. So I found another way, and that was through social justice. For me, I am the youngest of 9, grew up in a 3-bedroom house in a Houghton site with very little support, if you want. And just last night I was speaking to a person saying to them, look, I'm very nervous about tomorrow's event. And he said to me, share light on your own experience, living in poverty, knowing what it's like to go to school hungry, knowing what it's like to go to bed hungry. But we didn't have much, but and I always say this, we had a lot of love, you know. My mother died when I was 10 years of age, and it's not about a sad story. It's about the young people in the back of this room that I'm trying to say to them, you know, like in society tells us you can be anything you want to be if you put your mind to it. That's not true. You need sustainable meals, you need a secure family or secure people around you, and that's not the case for every single young person in the country. For me, really youth work was what saved me, going down to Ballyfermot Youth Service and being on, just like the young people in the back of the room, being a leader, giving me that quality of belonging in society, you know. And it's not always about financial support, while we're here today looking for financial support, but for young people it's that one-to-one support, somebody believing in them, and around the school meals as well, which I absolutely support. But it's the quality of food. It's and I don't believe that the quality of food is very good at the moment. So that's something that the Minister of Education has to look into. And I know that because Billy refuses, my wee girl, she's in senior infants, and she will not eat the food, and I wouldn't blame her. I genuinely wouldn't blame her, but I'm privileged to be able to make Billy a lunch, or father being able to make her a lunch. But again, it's not about just giving in that charity model. It's about good quality services for young people. What really struck me about this report, I'm not surprised by any of it, while it breaks my heart that we're here in 2026 speaking about poverty in this country. 1 in 6 children living in poverty in this country, and how 1 in 12, you know, are living in hardship, are living in poor accommodation, etc. For me, this report saying that it will take 4 to 5 generations for the speed of change to change the future for young people in this country, and that's absolutely overwhelming for any of us here today. So I will support the Children's Rights Alliance around the budget for 2027. We must and we have to do better in this country for our children and for all children. That includes migrant children, refugee children, Roma children, traveller children, all children. Who are we to say that one child matters more or less? At the end of the day, children are children. I remember having a conversation with my PA at the beginning of the year, just, you know, something, I think it was the presidential campaign last year actually, and I was sitting there and I said, does that person think their children is better than everybody else's child, or better than a refugee child? And he turned around to me and he said, yes, Eileen, because they have money, that person has millions of euros, so of course their children are better. And even in that moment, I took a step back and I was like, God, he's right. You know, how having the money, the finances, and people thinking their child is better because of the colour of their skin, because of the background that they're from. And for me, I genuinely believe all children should be loved and have basic human rights, basic roof over their head, not a hotel, not run down accommodation. And I'd like to thank the Children's Rights Alliance for all of their work in this here is the 5th edition of the report, and I think it's really important that we have organisations like the Children's Rights Alliance that keeps shining a light, that gives young people the platform that they deserve in this country and speaks with, not for young people. And that's what makes the Children's Rights Alliance different. They don't speak for, they speak with young people of this country. So I will pass back the mic again. I want to listen to the young people if anybody have any questions. And I think as a community, there's no race to the end. And that's what it feels like right now. It feels like it's a race to the end. Is the travellers getting more? Is the refugees getting more? Is the Roma children getting more? Or settled children? So that's my message today. There's no race to the end, and that the government should really invest in our young people. And for that young person I spoke to today, you know, to get a hand up instead of just giving a handout. Thank you.
So much, Senator Flynn, Eileen, for sharing your personal story and really showing us that despite, I suppose, the systemic failures, barriers in your life, you have thrived, and you're such a great role model for all young people and adults, whether they're travellers, settled people, homeless people, or migrants. And thank you for your continued campaigning as well within the Oireachtas for equality for everyone. Very interestingly, I've been at a number of events recently where this issue of exclusion and othering has come up time and time again. At the other end of the life of our lives, in Trinity College, they launched celebrating their 20 years of the Tilda study, which is looking at ageing. And one of the things that they were able to show is that having lack of connection, that lack of inclusion, lack of community and being and a place to belong is literally, you know, bad for your health and can mean early death. You know, so I mean, at the very minimum, when we're talking about child poverty, we're talking about shorter life expectancies for people at the other end of their lives, and missed opportunities all through their lives. And at the very end of at the other side of the spectrum, we have scenes like what happened up in Belfast last night, when you don't provide places and spaces for young people to belong, when they feel excluded, where they feel that there's no social mobility for them. They're very easily invited into groups to create damage and destruction because it's somewhere for their anger to go. So thank you again, Senator Flynn. So your programme has the full information and biographies for each of the panellists. So I'm just going to welcome them in order, and then we can jump straight into discussions. So beside me here is Liz Canavan, who's Assistant Secretary General of the Social Policy and Public Service Reform Division in the Department of the Taoiseach. We've Dervla Burke, who's the child support worker in Focus Ireland. Then Stuart Buchanan, Head of Advocacy and Impact here in YMCA Dublin. And then at the end, somebody that you all know well is Chania Ward, our Chief Executive in the Children's Rights Alliance. So maybe I can get each of you to give us your initial response, reflecting on the content of this morning, the junior leaders, what they've eloquently outlined, and some of Senator Eileen Flynn's keynote speech as well. Can I hand over to you?
Thanks. Good morning, everybody.
So a couple of things struck me really from what the young people were saying and then what Eileen said as well. And that's about that idea of giving people a hand up. And I suppose having trusted people in your life and how important that is. And I know that we obviously, in looking at the whole issue of child poverty, do focus on the financial supports and other things about removing the stresses from children and families' lives. But there's something very important about that idea of something more than that, which is about being part of a community and having, as I say, a trusted person in your life. And that's really important. And I suppose the second thing that struck me, particularly from what the Senator was saying, was around that idea of all children. And I think there is, I suppose that we're at a moment when there's a challenge in terms of some of the narrative that's out there at the moment about our children and all children. And I think that's incredibly important that we get this right now. And then I heard, not to focus on the today, but no more than you and all of you in the room, I'm sure you heard the whole stuff on the news this morning about Belfast and them talking about young people. And I'm like, well, young people didn't cause this. The narrative causes this. The lack of a community causes this. Being disconnected causes this. And making differences between people causes this. So I was really struck by that idea of all children. And that expression that the Senator used about the race to the end, is always in comparison to somebody else. Am I doing better? What are they getting that I'm not getting? As opposed to saying we want to raise everybody up and some people need more help than others. So I just thought they were the things that struck me.
Hi, I'm a child support worker from Focus Ireland's Family Centre in Mountjoy Street. There's over 5,600 children currently in emergency accommodation in Ireland, and we're talking one hotel room with their whole family, and travelling, like you said, across counties to go to school and being placed in accommodations with no public transport, no access to paths, as you say, to walk to a bus. There's, as Eileen said, and I think the point you both made as well, the people we work with, the parents and the children, they know what they need. The junior leaders, they know what's needed as well. I think we just need to have those high quality services like ourselves and like YMCA and other community services to empower the parents and the children to do what they know they need with our support. As I think you both said, there is a level of bureaucracy, and then there's a bit of a gap, and then there's community services and the people we're supporting. And I think we just need to trust the parents and the children to make decisions they need, but they need our support to do it, and we need the support of the government to do that work. There's 14 child support workers in Ireland, and as I say, over 5,500 children. So the children that we do work with, I do think see a big difference in the support we can do, and as do the parents, and that's the feedback we get. But it is a drop in the ocean of what's needed, and the only way to change that is better investment now. It goes without saying that we need more housing, but as I say, there's 5,500 children in homelessness now, and they need to be supported now, not in a budget in a couple of years' time, but in this budget this year. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, folks. Welcome to Ainger Street. This is the oldest and the largest of YMCA Dublin's community hubs. you're very welcome here. You will not see them, but there are a collection of services in the building the whole way through, from community childcare provision. You have met and encountered some of our young people from one of our youth work services, alongside that wraparound family support, and you're sitting in one of our community spaces from which a number of community services are delivered as well. I think the starting point where I was very struck by was Philip's, I think, rightly took us to that point around safe spaces, and I suppose that psychological concept of safety, emotional security and well-being, which I guess is the launch pad for any of us in terms of growing into secure, confident, competent adults. So I thought that was a really apt starting place, and that sense of security is somewhere that should be taken for granted in the home, but we know that is not often the case. It should be the experience that our children and young people have in their schools, but often isn't the case in their local community. We would search for that sense of security. You've drawn us already to what was on the media last night in Belfast as an extreme example of that, and then our place of belonging and security in society. Summer, I can assure you, it wasn't prompted or paid for the YMCA promo that she gave us, but again, the richness in Summer, I think what I was hearing there were those ideas of warmth and acceptance and belonging, which might feel a wee bit deeper and less connected to more extreme concepts of poverty, but again, absolutely critical to that idea of feeling safe and secure and equipped in the home and in the community and in society. And I think the comments of Senator Flynn, and I just one of the quotes around that idea of secure people around you, I think there's a richness to that and a setting that I think the experience of poverty strips that away in a physical sense, but also in a psychological sense. So I think that concept of security, belonging, there's a real richness to that I think is at the heart of what we're doing, but I think sits in direct contrast then to the figure of 95,000 children, as we're seeing in what Children's Rights Alliance have produced today, who have that experience of consistent poverty, and how that is even more extreme for families from minority backgrounds or with additional needs, and what that experience of belonging, safety, security, welcome, capacity looks like for those. And I think the starting point is to echo that call for continued and increased investment in those services that target those who need it the most, as is being laid out in the monitor for us today.
Thanks, Stuart, for hosting us today. And I suppose what I was reflecting on, and this is where I'm going to go off piste, and my team are going to give out to me about, but I was watching the youth leaders and the work that they do in contributing to their community and shaping and leading the future. And I know in the community I grew up in, there was no YMCA. And there was no way to develop those kind of leadership skills. There was nowhere to hang out. There was no way to contribute to the community. So even though you might see the inequality in your community, there's no way to make a difference. And actually the only thing I could join was the Legion of Mary. And so I was in the Legion of Mary, and there was a group of very lovely women actually looking after us in the Legion of Mary, but that was the only thing you could do, go to prayer sessions and deliver Catholic papers. And I see today, when I see the youth organisations and the work that they're doing, and I just think, wow, this is the real transformational piece that we were all missing. Because I can tell you that when I did crawl into university, I was pretty lost in those early years, and what I was missing was the toolkit, the skills that you get from that kind of work, and it took some time to catch up and develop. And I think we take our youth services for granted, to be honest, and particularly investing in those safe spaces, as Philip talked about already. And even if you were to look at the national budget and what's being put into the creation of independent youth spaces, it's a fraction of what it should be. And I want to call this out because the Late Late Toy Show grants, which the Community Foundation manage and deliver, is actually delivering more for play and independent spaces than the actual government is in the main, to be honest. And that's not good enough. That's something that we have to address. We have very talented youth organisations throughout the country doing really transformational work. We need to build on that. There should be no waiting list for services. There should be no gaps. There should be plenty of spaces for young people to feel safe and to grow and develop in. The budget has to go in that direction. I was also very moved by Senator Flynn and her comments, and I was delighted she took up the invitation to speak here today. She's a busy woman, she's a popular politician. I think we've invited her a couple of years, and other people got her on their speaking list and said, so I was delighted that she could be here with us today. And she is such an amazing spokesperson for addressing child poverty in Ireland, because she takes us through that personal experience, and it's hard because you can't expect young people to always talk about it. So you have to have adults and leaders do that. But what I always love about her story is, what's the game changer? What makes a difference? How do we have this national representative now in our parliament, and hearing that it's just one or two services that made that happen? A homeschool liaison officer in her local community is actually how it happens. That actually gives me great hope, because that's what we need. We need hope. We need to hear what those solutions are. And it reminds us, actually, national policy, government policy, is actually what will change the inequality in our communities and our societies, and it's completely possible to change. So yeah, that's what I was thinking today. So I'm feeling very hopeful about what's possible in the budget, but I have lots of cranky things to say about the budget later on.
Thanks very much, everyone. So we've covered some of this already, but it's a really uphill battle in terms of child poverty, and as Stuart has said, those numbers are stark, even though there's been some improvement. There's incredible work going on at national level and in local communities across the country. I know we've mentioned some of them, but would anyone else like to share a little bit more about some of what you see as the most effective child poverty measures and programs, either nationally or some really good practice from learnings that have been done and on a local level?
So I guess at national level, I mean, obviously we've had a big focus on income supports because I think that is kind of the baseline for people in terms of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if families and parents are less stressed about the finances, and they have confidence to do other things, and there's greater sense of safety in the house and a greater sense of confidence in the house. So income supports are incredibly important, hard to win in the budget row, but they're really, really important. And along with those, then some of the targeted provision around Equal Start and DEIS, they're really important, because they just step in and go that extra piece for those children and young people who need it. But I think at local level, what we're seeing now, we have a lot of services out there, lots of programs, and Tanya's just referred to a long-standing program, Homeschool Liaison. I suppose what we're seeing at local level in areas where families and children are at most disadvantage, where it's really, really working well, or where we see something really exciting, is where there is that kind of local community-based provision, which is really integrated, that's very responsive, and that's very tailored to that local community, and where services are working in a really collaborative way with both statutory and other non-statutory, not in competition, and that are really meeting families where they're at, not saying, well, here's the programme, do you want to take the programme? They're actually saying, well, where are you at, and what can we offer to meet you where you're at? And I think something about that kind of relational work, to me, is the next generation of where we need to go in terms of services.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, that hyper-local, one size doesn't fit all. Dervla, anything else you wanted to add? Yep.
Yeah, as you say, there's so many amazing services, and I think it's important to note that there are amazing initiatives out there, the likes of the NCS sponsor scheme, which all our children will be able to go on being in emergency accommodation, but early year services need to be able to afford it. And at the minute, it is just not workable between what NCS sponsor can offer and what private paying services can offer. And I just think that's really important. We have so many creches saying we would love to take as many of your children as we possibly can, but we simply can't afford to. And I think that's, the initiatives may be there, but they need to be workable at ground level, at the front line, you know, and that's just one example of one that is a brilliant idea, but in practice it also needs to work as well. Same goes the likes of the DESH model in school, smaller classes, more SNAs, free school lunches, all amazing things, but we have emergency accommodations in every type of area in Dublin, Kildare and Meath. They're affluent areas and areas with DESH schools, and I think it's important that we have very vulnerable children going to schools in all areas, and they all need one-on-one time with teachers. They all need free school lunches. They all need free after school and youth clubs and breakfast clubs, and you know, it's important that that's looked at when the money is you know, going to the different areas, that all children need that, all children in emergency accommodation and outside of it too. So, yeah.
Thanks, Dervla. Stuart, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think I'm drawn to, and there's maybe some overlap. I think affordable, accessible, high quality early years provision is I guess the ultimate early intervention measure, and one of the key interventions around child poverty. And I know within the Child Poverty and Wellbeing Programme Office's plan, I mean, it's very, very clearly laid out as a key anti-poverty measure. I'd be preaching to the choir, but the direct benefits of early years provision, physical, social, emotional, spiritual development are well known, but the impact of accessible, affordable early years provision in terms of breaking intergenerational poverty, those links and the context that's in there, again, a very solid research and evidence base against that. There has been significant progress made on that, significant state investment. I mean, a doubling of that investment to almost $1.5 billion over the last 5 years, and that is not to be sneezed at. You've referenced as well a couple of those really promising initiatives like Equal Start, and I suppose more recently we're seeing more targeted initiatives like Be a Blast and really digging into the food and nutrition elements of that as well. We're seeing some additional work being done on school uniforms and those pieces. I'm going to introduce the but into this answer as well. I think we have a direction of travel that has been laid out. I'm not sure we have a destination as yet in terms of early years provision, what that means in terms of being accessible and affordable for all. What we do need to see is that roadmap being laid out, and we need to see the investment in place to, in essence, take the principles of, for example, Equal Start to actually deliver on all of the elements of that we see would make a difference to systemic experiences of poverty there as well. I think my last point on that, I think the but as well is we cannot see, for example, early years provision or youth work provision, the work of homeless provision happening in isolation. We must give space in the policy arena for wraparound services and see, rather than seeing one in isolation, that we consider the child, the young person, as part of a family unit, as part of a community unit, as part of a societal unit, and think more broadly and more holistically in terms of how we do that.
Tanya?
One of the things for me, because we've been doing the child poverty work now for a number of years, and every year I have to say in the last 5 years there's something very significant happened. And what was really significant, particularly in the last year of the budget, is the investment in the DESH Plus programme, for one thing. And that's significant because we know from the school principals, the teachers, the support staff and the young people and families themselves that the DESH programme, while it's been very successful, it just has not been enough to break the cycle of inequality in those communities. They are so under-resourced. And the programme that's just been launched, I have to say, is evidence-based, well-resourced. It's going to support 121 schools throughout the country with deputy vice principal, therapists, extra supports, and it's going to be groundbreaking when that programme is rolled out. And I had the privilege to be at the launch in St Aidan's out in Tala, which is an amazing school doing extraordinary work. And the amount of principals I spoke to who were so emotional, actually, really emotional at the launch, because they said, you don't realise what this will mean for our communities. And we know what the outcomes are going to be from an initiative like this, because it's going to mean that those young people are going to do better when they leave school. It means the teachers can focus on teaching and learning. We know they're going to get the young people will get better qualifications and they'll earn higher salaries and be less likely to be in poverty at the end. The other thing I think that's significant in the last year as well is what happened around the income budget. Now, it has to be said, for the last couple of years, up until last year, the increases in income were very small, and particularly for people on welfare payments. And in a way, that's unacceptable if you have a crisis in child poverty numbers, because poverty starts with a lack of money to buy everyday essentials. So what we see in the last budget is a significant increase in the child support payment for children over 12, €16, and €8 for children under 12. We also see an extension of the working family payment for families, and we also see those families getting the fuel allowance. So that was very meaningful. That made a very significant difference to those families. The challenge is, of course, this is up against a context where the cost of food and energy is extremely high. So I can tell you now, the statistics would have been far worse if those increases weren't implemented. But at the same time, it's telling us we need to see the same type of increase in this year's budget to ensure that those families are cushioned against the cost of food and energy costs as well. The other thing that was significant for me was the extension of the Holiday Hunger Programme actually into youth services, 500,000. And there is a case study in the Child Poverty Monitor of Feroga. And that was significant because the programmes, the youth services were telling us day in, day out, children and young people are arriving into their programmes hungry. Their families are struggling to put food on the table, and it's at a time in life when you do need you have increased food needs. This is what happens, and how can you expect a young person to participate in a youth service and arrive hungry and to not be irritable, to concentrate, to get on well with everyone? That's very hard when those basic needs haven't been addressed. So I think that's very significant in the budget. What I'd like to see, though, in next year's budget is an extension, perhaps, in some of those programmes, because I think there's real opportunities and real learning. So if you take the income piece, match it again this year. But when it comes to food poverty, I think we need to make sure we continue that type of programme in youth services. But also, what could we be doing for community and voluntary organisations that are in contact with those families in deep poverty? We are rolling out an initiative at the moment with the support of the Community Foundation of Ireland. We rolled out 500,000 last year through our member organisations to deal with holiday hunger, particularly around the Christmas period. We're going to do the same this year. But we need the government to step in and take over that role. And what we've been able to demonstrate is the community and voluntary organisations are in direct contact with the families that need it and have the capacity to not only identify what their issues are, but actually get to them. A good example of that are the domestic violence organisations. What's happening in those organisations is women and men are arriving, they're in coercive relationships where the food money is being held back, basically, and they're arriving hungry. And they're asking for help from domestic violence refugees. So there's these exceptional groups of people affected by poverty and by the inequalities in their communities. And there's excellent organisations with the frontline relationships with those communities. So we'd love to see the government being able to step in 2027 and take over that really important role.
Thanks, Tanya, for that. Liz, can I come back to you and talk a little bit about the Child Poverty and Wellbeing Programme Office, which was established and very much welcomed by all the stakeholders here. So as you're coming to the end of the initial work plan of the Programme Office, would you share with us some of the key successes and what are the challenges that still remain in relation to driving that cross-governmental, cross-departmental work to end child poverty?
So thanks. So I guess we've been reflecting obviously on this ourselves because we're trying to think about our next programme plan. So we've produced an annual report, as you'll know, every year, the budget report. So I guess as we've kind of looked back at what the impact has been, I mean, we do think just in general terms, it has given visibility to the issue of child poverty in a way that I don't think it would have, attracted otherwise. Being at the centre of, the centre of government, and I think that no matter what the topic is, that adds something to the leverage we have around an issue like that. We have tried to bring a strong emphasis on targeted income supports that I mentioned already, and as Tanya said last year, we felt we made really good inroads, and I'll come to the challenges in a minute. I think some of the other universal supports around school books and school meals, and then the targeted things around DESH Plus and Equal Start, these are all incredibly important because school is so important. And also, destigmatising things around books and schools and everyone turning up on the first day in the new year and everyone has their books and you're not the kid in the back. It doesn't. I think these are all really important in terms of, children's opportunities in school and getting off on the right foot. We're doing some work at the moment which we hope to bring to government shortly on Child and Family Homeless Action Plan. Obviously that's a major issue. Both in terms of how we can do better on prevention and progressing families, and at the same time recognising there are children today right now who are living in those circumstances. And I think the work that we have done has helped to highlight how important it is to try to improve their situation because of the lifelong impact even a temporary spell in homelessness has on children and young people. So that's important. We have done, obviously there's been improvements around participation, not maybe as much as we would like, but I do think it's important it's been part of our programme plan because again, I think for many people they wouldn't fully understand the value of children being involved in stuff, whatever that stuff happens to be, the place where they can find their tribe, where they feel they belong, and have an opportunity to maybe find something that they're really good at or they have a real interest in and an outlet. So I think those things are really important. And we've also done some work on that local integrated piece, a specific piece of work around relational working, which has proven really to been a big hit, both with national players but also with local players. We've done some really good work on that. And as I said, I think that's somewhere we need to go with our next generation of how we deliver services for children and families living in the most disadvantaged circumstances. So I think that platform, that mandate is really important. We were, as a system convener, I think the office provides that, brings a spotlight on the budget. Everyone knows we're going to produce a budget report. If they forget, we remind them. And I think we've given a little bit of firepower around initiatives like things like the relational working and the integrated working and the Child and Homeless Action Plan. So in terms of the challenges, I mean, the budget is a challenge every year. I suppose the way I would describe it is there's lots of choices and there's lots of voices. And really, I suppose it's trying to make sure we advocate on behalf of children and families living in poverty insofar as we can in our role at the centre. But obviously those voices and choices are determined at the end of the day by government, as it should be, and by ministers and by our colleagues across government. But there are lots of choices and there are lots of voices, so it is a challenge. I think one of the things, and I kind of referred to it earlier, that I think is most challenging now. When you talk about things like what Stuart mentioned, that wraparound, that really tailored responsive local service, you know, that opportunity for kind of joint enterprise across different types of provision, I think there's a lot of systemic barriers to doing that. I think a lot of money comes down in very discrete silos and discrete programs, all very valid. There are reasons for that. It's about accountability. It's about what ministers have a remit to do. But they're quite discrete, and it can be very hard to have mixed models of provision, which I think is some of what we need now. So I think that's a challenge. And then on the housing side, I think apart from the homelessness issue for the children and families living without homes today, I'm also worried about, with the need for speed, we're building houses, but are we building communities? And are we putting enough into our thinking about what makes a community, which is not just a lot of houses, it's more than that. So that's something that's quite on my mind at the moment in terms of challenges that we need to sort of wrestle with now.
Thanks. Yes, we've learned from the past that just building houses without communities and services is not the answer. Dervla, just coming back to you then in relation to housing and homelessness and the crisis that has significantly increased, I suppose, since even the last launch since the launch of the first monitor especially, but can you give any insights from the front line on how this crisis impacts children specifically, and maybe what can be done to mitigate that impact?
Yeah, so I see my role of being here really just to put a voice on the experiences of the children I work with and the parents and wider family unit. But for me, I suppose I just want to thank the Children's Rights Alliance for shining a light on the service we do provide, and an organisation I'm incredibly proud to work for. But I suppose when it comes to the children, the impact of homelessness and the housing crisis on their childhood and on their life is just massive, you know. Like, for example, I was with the family just this week actually, and they were moved the day their baby turned 1 month old from Kildare, an emergency accommodation in Kildare, to one in North County Dublin with 3 weeks left of the school year. Their older daughter's day trip was already paid for, their school trip, and I was out with them in their emergency accommodation on Monday, and I just spent a bit of time with the little one. We played games, did magnet-tiles, just had a little chat about how she was feeling, and she was just so disappointed. Now look, her parents are going to try to get from North County Dublin to Kildare on public transport for the next couple of weeks, but just how upset she is, to be moved just like that, like it was no real reason for it, just one day, your booking's changed and you have to go here. And just how frustrated her parents were, that they just feel they're just numbers on a page that can just be moved around, and not a family with the same needs and wants and worries that any other parent has for their child. And that is by no means a unique situation. We have those week in, week out children just being moved from one accommodation to another. Do they change schools? Do they stay in the same school and try and travel? It could be the guts of 2 hours each way, and then they're missing their breakfast and their dinner in the emergency accommodation, and they've no cooking facilities, so they have to be there, or they've no laundry, so when are they going to get that done? And the impact of all of those little things. And I think that's what it is for children and parents. It's no one thing. It's not that they're far away from their school, or that they don't have somewhere safe to go home to, or that they're one of 200 rooms in a hotel. That's not what it is. I think it's each small thing builds up and just absolutely erodes the confidence of children and their parents at an absolutely pivotal time in their lives. You know, we work with children from 0 right up to 18, you know, and I was out with one yesterday. We just went for a hot chocolate, a teenage girl, and she's trying to study for her junior cert in the same room as a gang of toddler siblings. And it's just, you know, our job is to connect them with these types of services, the youth clubs, the homework clubs, the after schools. But I just think the impact on them of this ongoing, because we're not talking 6 weeks in emergency accommodation, we're talking 2, 3, 4 years, it could be longer, and it's only getting longer, you know. And the control and independence that is taken away from parents to make decisions for their family is just massive. Like I was doing cookies in our after school club with a gang last week, and one of them was showing me how you check whether a cookie is baked or not. And he was telling me that him and his mum used to bake all the time, and they can't now because they don't have an oven. And it's his first time since moving to emergency accommodation at least 2 years ago that he's gotten to bake, you know. So they're just a little snapshot of what the children are going through, and I don't think I have to explain the damage that's doing to children. And we don't know what the effects are going to be. This is the first time, as you say, since the child poverty launch 5 years ago, the numbers are just absolutely staggering, and it's the first time there's been this number of children ever, and we don't know what that's going to look like in the future. And that's the thing. We can talk about the stats and the data and the money all day long, but what the children care about is baking with their parents, staying in the same school as their friends, going back in September and having some news about the activities they got up to over summer. So I think it's just important to give a little snapshot of those experiences, and you know, that I don't think in a country as wealthy as ours, that's too much to ask for our children, you know. But anyways, I suppose that leads me on to that there is things we can do. As I said earlier, it goes without saying that housing, and as you say, building housing with communities as well, is the number one way to mitigate the trauma of homelessness, and to move children out of emergency accommodation as quickly as we can is the biggest thing. But right now there is over 5,500, as I did say, in emergency accommodation, and I just think it's absolutely vital that they have specialised staff like ourselves who are there for their individual needs. We're not looking at them as a group of numbers that big, but as each individual child and what they need, and assessing that, and looking at linking in with our colleagues in youth clubs and schools and early years services to get those high quality services that get them out of their emergency accommodation, but also doing that work ourselves of the drop-in clinics for those that aren't yet linked in with our service to come and ask questions and get some advice, and our after school club where they can come on their way home from school, as I say, staying out of the emergency accommodations as much as they can. We have big plans for summer, from activities and workshops to the zoo and Emerald Park and all sorts of other things. Our plans get bigger each year, but to be able to give these children happy memories of the most traumatic time in their lives, and to reassure parents that they are doing everything they can in the most difficult of circumstances to help their children. And I think a point was made earlier about how far away some people are from services, and I think that's quite a unique piece of the work we're able to do in the family centre, is that outreach where we're out in emergency accommodations, that if people aren't near public transport, or they have no way of getting into us in town, that we can get out to them and be there for them, and be, you know, the one-to-one with children, having just a bit of time to play or chat, or as I say, go for a stroll and a hot chocolate, and also be that listening ear for parents when they just have had enough and they're just fed up with being part of a very broken housing system and homeless services, and just being able to listen and to hear them and to advocate for families. Vulnerable people are way overrepresented in emergency accommodation, the likes of people from the travelling community, the Roma community, and children with additional needs. So being able to support parents to advocate for their children and for their families' needs is a really important part of what we do. You know, child support work doesn't just respond to homelessness, it works to protect childhood. And I think, you know, as I said earlier, that needs to be done now while children are in emergency accommodation to mitigate that trauma insofar as we can.
Thanks, Dervla. Stuart, and the YMCA was featured as a spotlight solution in last year's report. Can you talk us through why programs like your early years program and the Equal Start Tier 1, talk us through what makes those so effective and so impactful?
Yeah, so I referenced earlier our approach to service delivery is through our community hubs, which you're sitting in one of those. So YMCA community hubs are multifunction spaces that provide that sense of safety and security that was referenced to us earlier, and they are where we provide a range of integrated services that give that sense of wraparound support for the child, for the young person, and for the families. And we see that affordable, accessible early years provision and the open access youth provision really being the core of that. Again, for fear of preaching to the choir, however, we're very clear that the child or the young person's development sits within a family context. So there is that series of wraparound family services, in-house family support, other activities and programs around that. And then more broadly, the family is supported and nurtured within a community context. So the provision of open access community spaces, and then a range of community services, very often delivered by partners, would make up that mix within our community hub model. There's a fundamental piece for us in terms of ethos. You folks, unless you come in through the back entrance today, will have literally accessed the building through one front door, as everybody who enters our services will do. So I think there's a deeper point within that around a sense of belonging and dignity and worth, that whatever service you're entering a community hub through should be through that. So whether you're coming to hire this space for your five-a-side football at lunchtime, whether your child is coming to access the provision, or whether you're coming for a deeper, maybe more therapeutic session that's been signposted by our family support service, that is through one front door. So there's a philosophical piece around well-being. Maybe to step back from that, I suppose the model is also based then on principles of social enterprise, which I'll come to in a second in terms of impact. So I think there's a piece in this for us where a number of our services people will pay for. So those who can pay will pay, and those who can't are either subsidised by the state or subsidised by us, or those services are provided for free. But again, at the front end, the dignity is there, the equality of access, and then at the back end, our staff are working hard to make that happen. What that does mean is then where a surplus is made, a reasonable surplus is made, that is reinvested locally into services that are either needed for wraparound supports or to support our expansion. Surpluses are not extracted from those communities. They are not going to shareholders or to whoever elsewhere. They're being invested into those communities. And my last point, what those have allowed us to do is to take the model, the YMCA community model here in Ainger Street, We opened 2 hubs as part of a local cluster in Balmain and in the Clare Hall area in the north side. We will be opening further community hub provision in City West, in the southwest of Dublin, and a series of other community hubs as part of a pipeline opportunity. So again, we have the model at the front end, which is providing the wraparound support, but a pipeline then of opportunities with what we believe is a sustainable business model, as well as the most effective model in terms of delivering services, particularly to those in need, but with the ability for all of the community to access them.
Thanks, Stuart. I'm going to come to my last question to the panel, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. So, Tanya, the current narrative around Budget 2027 suggests it's going to be a difficult road ahead, with talks of levies and all that. So, you know, what's needed, in your opinion? What should we prioritise in this year and subsequent budgets if we're really going to break this cycle of poverty?
Yeah. Thanks, Melania. I might start talking about the budgeting process itself, and I think that's the first thing we need to have a discussion about. And I'm going to ask a question of the audience, and you might put your hands up. How many of you are following the debate about levies at the moment in the media? If you put your hand up. How many of you actually know what it means? I saw one hand there. But we might put you on the spot and ask you to explain it, but I don't want to be mean, but you might come in on it. So it's a debate we have to follow, actually, as campaigners, because it could potentially be very significant to us. And I have to say it's a very frustrating debate and discussion. And it starts with the underfunding of some key government departments for existing levels of service. That's the first thing to know. We know what goes on through the budgeting process is that the government departments go in and out, trying to outline what their current costs are. And education and health in particular, TUSA is a good example of as well, are demand-led services. So they're based on the population. So unfortunately, when the population's going up, they walk in, they say, we need more money just to keep the doors open. And consistently what happens through the budgeting process is that the civil servants go through a charade where they agree to a figure which they know they can't actually deliver the service for, and they are given a supplemental budget later on in the year. That's what has been going on the last couple of years. This year, there's been a roundabout turn. Because the Department of Education wouldn't introduce cuts, because it effectively would have meant cuts to teacher numbers, which they can't do. I don't think anyone here in the room would want to see a cut in teacher numbers. There is this discourse around, okay, because you won't make these cuts, the other government departments are going to pay for this levy. And that really concerns me, because if you look at the detail, and it's in the Child Poverty Monitor, Naomi went through all the PQs to understand what it means. If you look at the detail of it, it's imposing levies on key government departments, but particularly the one that concerns me is the Department of Children and Disability and Equality. In the messaging, it's saying disability services won't be cut. Okay, that's good, because 1 in 4 children are disabled or have a disability. But what does it mean for early years services? What does it mean for Equal Start, which Stuart's just been talking about? What does it mean for TUSLA, the last safety net for children in the country? We know they are dealing with a demand surge, very complex issues coming through. They are legally mandated to provide child protection services. Will they have their budget cut? So that really concerns me in the current context of the budget. And I think we need to rethink how we do the national budget. We need an evidence-led approach to how we design the national budget. Enough of this coercion and sniping and really this kind of messaging that's thrown out into the media, which can have very serious implications for children and family services. And people have said this, would have heard me say this, I think we need to rethink the role of DEEPR as well, because what concerns me sometimes is the way it's been set up, there is overreach into the policy direction of the different government departments, and I don't think when that department was set up, that was what its purpose was. So that's the first thing I think we need to think about. So we are told there's a difficult road ahead, and in fact there are many difficult roads ahead, and we know there will be recessions a couple of years down the road. But one thing that frustrates me a little bit as well with how we're doing budgets is that, you know, for many of us watching the fuel protest recently, some of us were talking about, do I need to rent a tractor? Do I need to get children into O'Connell Street, leave the tractor and go off and have my dinner? Is that what I need to do next? It's not acceptable that the government has responded in the way it has to some of the things that have happened nationally. Because I'll be absolutely sure about it, the impact the fuel protest is going to have implications for the rest of the budget as well. That's the other thing that got missed by the media at the time. The sums of money that were used to fix what happened around the fuel protest will have a direct effect in the budget as well. And what effect is it going to have for children and young people and family services? They're all the things that need to be discussed actually in the public domain instead of this discourse around levies. What I'd like to see in the budget is some very serious thinking, evidence-led thinking, that clearly led to the funding of the DESH Plus programme, which is completely evidence-led. That's the kind of way we need to design the national budget. And the focus on this year needs to be on income, as I said. But it also needs to be on continuing the funding for the groundbreaking programmes that are making a difference for the people in consistent poverty and at risk of poverty. So Equal Start, which Stewart's YMCA is getting to benefit from. That programme, we know, there's banks of research from other countries that those programmes in early years are the great levellers. They are the ones to invest and back into the future. We're not only investing in the children of today, we're actually investing in the economy and society of the future. The DESH Plus programme, again, are the programmes to invest in and expand upon. Not only the children of today, it's the economy and society of the future. And the other thing to think about when it comes to funding these services and why we need to protect them from cuts, only look across the water. It is a warning. When you cut child poverty projects, the statistics and the levels of inequality increase exponentially. And that's what you're seeing across the water when it comes to the child poverty figures. What I'd like to see in the budget as well, if you look at the drivers of inequality, I already talked about the important increases in income, but we also need to see a focus on the housing budget. And the two areas, just to pick up from what Derval has said, there is going to be a housing action plan, a homeless action plan. That's going to be very important, but in particular, we need to see an expansion of support services for families experiencing homelessness. They make a huge difference in this most difficult event in their lives. But we also need to see big investments in social housing. Social housing is going to help a lot of families get out of poverty because the cost of housing is eating into the household income. There's about 25,000 families at this moment in time on the housing waiting list. Another 30,000 plus families in receipt of HAP payments in private rented accommodation. Those families in getting HAP should actually be on social housing list and getting social houses. The government is committing to about 12,000 social housing a year over the life of this programme for government. That's absolutely achievable. And guess what? It nearly matches up to the numbers of families on the housing list and also in receipt of the HAP payments. So I think that's where the government needs to prioritise. And the last piece I'd say is remember play and recreation and those safe spaces that young people want. Consistently in all the consultations with children and young people, it's top of the list for children under 12. It's nearly top of the list often for children over 12 as well. And that's an area which has really been neglected by the government. You know, we had better programmes in Ireland around play and recreation in the past than we do now. And I think that's a real deficit. So that's what I'd like to see change in Budget 2027, but also in future budgets in 2028, 2029 and 2030.
Thanks very much, Tanya. Okay, so members of staff from the Children's Rights Alliances are around the room with roving mics. So if you'd just like to raise your hands, if you have a question or comment, please just let us know who you are when you stand up as well. Thank you.
Hi again, Charlotte O'Donovan from Good Shepherd, Cork. And I just want to pick up on a few points Derval and Tanya picked up on them, and even Stuart had aspects of it too. And I suppose I'm just going to focus in on homeless services because that's where my specific remit is. But I suppose what is frustrating is that while we see so much progress in adding extra initiatives like youth services and early years supports and whatnot for vulnerable people, a lot of these services are just not accessible for families in private emergency accommodation. And I just can't understand how we haven't moved on that, because of course we need houses and all that plan, and that's a work in progress. That's the you know, the solution going forward. But we're in crisis now, and we have responded over the years to other crises with more immediate urgency, COVID and various different crises. But back in September, we highlighted at the Poverty Summit how children had nowhere to play, children had nowhere to cook. Children are travelling miles and miles and miles to get to school. Now, the average child can be 3 years in homeless services. A child born into homeless services, that's all their life with no cooking. That's all their life with no play areas. So I don't understand how we can't tackle that immediately. I don't understand. Can you hear me? Yeah. I can't understand. There are providers making millions on private emergency accommodation, and the units are packed to the hilt with families. But yet there might be a playroom a fraction the size of this room that's locked half the time. There's an initiative started in Cork with Let's Grow Together, a fabulous home visiting service. And we're partnering with them in Edale House to say, look, some of the families you can come into Edale House for the home visiting because they actually can't do it in the private emergency accommodation. But I know that the majority of families won't be able to travel in to Edale House because the ordeal of having to pack up 3 or 4 small children to get to a meeting at a certain time. Like, I don't know if anybody watched the movie Rosie, Roddy Doyle, and saw the struggle of the family getting out to school in the morning. And anybody with young children, if it didn't move you, it was very moving. But they were 2 well-abled, functioning parents. Now, imagine a morning where there's mental health issues, where there's a single mother, where there's other issues going on. And we're trying to get families to access services. We need to tackle the private emergency providers to provide proper playrooms, meeting rooms, where services can come in. And I can't understand why that's not happening, because there's a lot of money being made. I just can't understand it. I can't understand how 6-7 years later, we still haven't a national policy for transport for children in homeless services. I just can't understand why action isn't immediate for children now who are living in some of the worst conditions that any person should have to put up with. So just to bring that point home. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte. I'll take a few, maybe 2 more, and then we'll go back to the panel.
Craig Dwyer. I work for Minister Derek Cleary, so in the Department of Social Protection. So we're very conscious of levies at the moment, but I think it's also, just important to say that social welfare payments and schemes are also protected. The levies are on the administrative side. So look, I just kind of wanted to give a little bit of an update as to the work that has been ongoing in the department. And I know there was kind of recognition of the Budget 2026 measures, but soon after the Minister took up the position of Minister of Social Protection, he made tackling child poverty like a key priority, and I think we saw that through some of the measures in the budget regarding the increases in the child support payment, the increase in the fuel allowance, and the extension to the work and family payment. And I know now we're looking forward to the budget this year, and there are many choices and many voices. But I think just one important thing just to mention as well, because it's open at the moment, the Department of Social Protection have a consultation ongoing at the moment on a new targeted child payment and a work and age payment. So the consultation is open for another couple of days. So I imagine many in the room probably have already made a submission, but just to mention that. You know, and I think that, yes, we are looking forward to this budget this year as well, but like that's an important opportunity as well to kind of look at the current infrastructure within the social protection system, how that does support families, tackle child poverty, and how that might be addressed kind of into the future as well. And I know that the Minister is also quite keen on you know, continuing that work that has been done, and on supporting working families as well. And then also, like, the cost of disability will be a priority this coming budget as well. The other thing I just wanted to mention, and going back to what Senator Eileen Flynn was talking about earlier, she picked up on the school meals programme, and I know food poverty was brought up a little bit as well. Like, the school meals actually takes up like so much of my working week, but like I actually think it's such a fantastic program, you know. Like, in the region of 3.4 million meals are distributed to primary schools every week. Like, that's, you know, that's enormous. And like, yes, there are kind of issues around the nutritional quality of the meals in certain places, and the Minister actually recruited a dietitian into the department, seconded into the Department of Health, who has been conducting a review. That's due to be finalised shortly, and I'm sure there will be recommendations kind of coming out of that. But I think, like, you know, sometimes that the discourse around the nutritional value seem to kind of like take over a bit, and I think sometimes we risk kind of losing sight of that really important food poverty piece of the programme. So I just think kind of we just need to remember that piece as well. I think like a family of three kids in primary school, they're saving over €1,700 a year, you know, through the provision of the hot school meals in primary school. So yeah, that's just a couple of contributions from me.
Thanks, Craig.
Hey, I'm Mary Collins from Pavy Point again. I suppose when you look at poverty, I think when you look at poverty, you look at a lot of children. It obviously is a risk of children being taken into care, and it's not because of not great mothers and fathers, obviously, but life can be difficult for a lot of them. So also if they have mental health, if there's experience of domestic violence, it's all on top of layers. But I do know for a lot of social welfare changes there and the increases of social welfare, and it's like giving it in one hand but it's taken back in the other, because as soon as you get €5 or €6 in social welfare, which wouldn't go very far, you're looking at your rent increases. You'll get a letter from local authorities within a week saying your rent has gone up because your social welfare payment has gone up. We know within the traveller community there's a lack of specific accommodation for travellers. We have young people doubling up in bays. We have young people living in trailers in the backs of houses. Separate family, separate income, separate home, and they're not entitled to the fuel allowance. From my own experience with young mothers living in trailers, you could go to 3 bottles, not cylinders, I don't call them cylinders, I use bottles, 3 bottles of gas a week in the winter at €40 each, and they're not entitled to the fuel allowance. And as I said, it's a separate home, separate income, separate families. I have brought that up at the Social Inclusion Conference when the Minister for Social Protection was there, and I really do think that's something to look at. It's no fault of our own that we're overcrowded, that we're doubling up in bays. It's because there's no traveller-specific accommodation being built. So I really do think when you look at disability payments as well, you're looking at people, disability payments is enough the same as a pension. There's no kind of increases for more serious kind of disabilities and stuff like that. And people are actually struggling at the minute. And I think the social welfare payments needs to be looked at. I think a CE schemes needs to be looked at. We're out of date now. There's no incentive for people to take up the CE schemes. You're more or less working for €210. People can't manage. You're looking at women who might want to take up employment but can't take up employment because they're afraid that they'll lose a medical card and might have children that has autism. You're looking at people with autism that might have to go private and pay €600 or €700 for this, to have an assessment done on the babies. So there's real struggles out there, and I would say that lots of times government don't see the pain and the suffering out in the ground. I could bring them to a huge amount of sites in the Finglas and the Blanchetown area where people are living in hardship and experience hardship, like there is within the general population. And I think it really needs to be looked at within this budget in October. It's a crisis in this country, what parents and what children have to put up with.
Okay, I'll just go back to our panel then, see if there's anyone wants to reply.
Maybe just to say, first of all, in relation to child and family homelessness, so I mentioned earlier we are going to produce shortly, going to bring to government shortly a plan specifically around child and family homelessness, and I guess the way we've approached it is that we're producing an action plan that will be actions that all need to start immediately. You know, whether how quickly they can all be completed is a different matter, but that sense of urgency that everything that'll be in that plan, our intention is, will start straight away. It's based on a lot of stakeholder input, interviews. We were supported by yourselves actually in terms of getting voices of young people. So many of the issues that you've raised are certainly coming up as part of that, and we're going to try and deal with it there. In terms of some of the issues around social welfare, I think it's really important, and we refer to the ongoing look at various ways in which we support children and families and through income supports. And one of the real challenges is to look at those cliff edges and look at those points in which a benefit here impacts on entitlements elsewhere. And it is actually quite complex, and it's one of the things that's, you know, second tier child payment sounds like very straightforward. But actually, it's exactly for those reasons, to make sure that we don't have a category of people who lose out because we move to a different regime. So it's actually quite complex, and we're very, very mindful of that. And it's one of the reasons why we focused in the shorter term on, you know, investing in the existing regime before we make a big switch, so that we fully understand what the implications of that will be. But we are really mindful of that. You've raised some very specific issues there as well, and I'll take those away and check them out. Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else want to reply to anything that came up? Tanya?
Thanks so much to the Minister Cleary's advisor for giving us that overview. And I have to say, actually, you know, to be quite frank, he, as a minister, when it comes to income, the last time we saw those kind of increases when Regina Doherty was Minister for Social Protection. So, you know, we were really encouraged by what the Minister was able to do with the mandate last year, and we're really hopeful about what next year is going to look like. So I just want to acknowledge and thank you for that, because I know the Minister comes from a human dignity point of view, and that's definitely the feeling you get from it. And unfortunately, sometimes some in government have felt that they're rewarding people in poverty, and that's not it at all. We're actually providing people their rights, their socioeconomic rights, to be able to a minimal essential measure of living. So I think that's very important. The other thing on the food poverty piece and the hot school meals, it is disappointing that is the narrative that has got out there. Possibly what happened was the scheme expanded a little bit ahead of capacity. But it has to be said, there is a bit of middle class dimension to this debate as well. You've heard Katrina O'Sullivan come out and call that out, and you need a diversity of food. Of course, you need healthy food, you need a diversity of food to come through that programme as well. And one of the significant things, and it could get missed, but if you saw the survey that fed into the education convention, there's a big education convention taking place at this moment in time. But one of the findings that came through was parents really welcomed, when they were asked what's the good thing that has happened, and they said the free school books and the hot school meals. That comes out top of the list. And I was really encouraged by that, because the number of parents that participated in that consultation is huge, really significant. We haven't had that number of parents contribute. I think something like 42,000 parents took part in that consultation. So it's very notable and very significant, and I hope it's something that the Minister is able to build on future years. The other thing then, thanks to our colleagues in PAVE for outlining the cost. I mean, I don't think there's another group of people in the country who's paying more for fuel at this moment in time. And there's something, it is a form of indirect discrimination that travellers are experiencing. And one of the frustrating things for families at the moment in the traveller halting sites and the bays is, and this is extraordinary, they are doubling up in the bays, and they're being charged ground rent, but then they're not right by the council, but they're not entitled to any of the grants for new trailers, and they're not entitled to any of the welfare payments. So you're paying ground rent, and then you can't avail of any of the services that are available to help you. So it's great that you raised it with the Minister's advisor here, because he's the man that can try and fix it. But I think there's a quick fix to some of these issues, and it's just an issue that just needs to be looked at, extending the fuel allowance to travellers in this situation, but also extending all the other benefits available as well. I think it can be something that can be fixed.
And the insights. Thank you for your considered reflections and the insights that you've shared with us. A huge big thank you as well to our hosts here in the YMCA in Dublin. You've been a central part of the impact in the child poverty campaign. So thank you to the team here and to the junior leaders for your support with today. I know you've worked incredibly hard to ensure that everything was in place for all of us to sit here and enjoy today's launch. I'd like to extend our thanks to the Alliance team as well, who've made this launch possible. Many of you are here today, and if anyone has any questions or are interested in getting involved in the End Child Poverty campaign work, I'd encourage you to grab one of the staff members from the Children's Rights Alliance and have a chat with them over lunch. So before I hand over to our wonderful junior leaders who are going to send us off with some inspiration, it's important for all of us in this room to recognise and reflect on the issues raised in today's discussions and the analysis that has been provided in the Child Poverty Monitor. So, as has been said, the latest figures show that there are over 95,000 children in consistent poverty, a number 950 times greater than the number of us here today. So we know that this isn't right, and we know that we can change it. So with the right policy decisions and political investment, it's possible to break the cycle of poverty for children, young people and families in Ireland. And it won't be done in 1 year, and it'll take all of our ambition and all of our action and multiple budgets, but it can and should be done. So October is the second budget of this government, and our message to them today echoes the call from children and campaigners alike. Make it count. So on that note, I'd like to invite back to the front of the room here, our junior leaders, Summer, Kate, Tiffany, Simon and Philip. Over to you to remind the government.